Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Anthony Arcaro. I am the 6 to 12 Supervisor of Special Education. And we'd also like to thank Dr. Magro for coming back. We're excited to have him back and again, share more of his insightful information about a very important topic. So tonight, Dr. Magro will be presenting on navigating relationships and intimacy with a disability. Some of the topics he'll cover include dating, levels of intimacy, first date tips, hygiene best practices, and how to deal with rejection. Dr. Magro is an award-winning professional speaker, best-selling author, who is on the autism spectrum. He is also the CEO and president of KFM, Making a Difference, which is a nonprofit organization focused on disability advocacy, inclusion, and securing housing for those with special needs. So without further ado, now present you with Dr. Kerry Magro.
Our next guest is an accomplished public speaker and activist who has devoted his life to helping others. Not bad for a guy who was completely nonverbal for the first few years of his life. But once Kerry Magro found his voice, he had a lot to say.
My parents have always told me I was special, so why am I special? And then later on, I realized that I was even more special because I have autism.
Kerry Magro's childhood was marked with rough patches. He was completely nonverbal at age 2 and diagnosed with autism at age 4.
I just remember having difficulties trying to explain myself to the world around me.
When Kerry did speak, he struggled to express himself.
Most of my memories were simply just about that kid who wanted to communicate with the world around him, but didn't have the verbal means of actually doing that.
His mother, Suzanne, remembers watching her son have a hard time adjusting to the outside world.
He turned 2 and he was scared of everything. He was scared of the water, he was scared of the rain.
But as the years went on, Kerry slowly began to find his words.
When you can't communicate with the people you love the most in this world about even some of your basic needs, it gets really, really tough. So, but luckily, once I started talking, I never stopped talking.
Wow. This is a tough one today.
Cindy Hsu introduces us to an autistic man who's spreading awareness and understanding throughout the world.
And his latest way of educating people about autism is by making TikTok videos.
Received over 4.1 million views on TikTok, and I just had so many parents, educators, family members who just wanted to learn more about autism, and they were like, keep going, keep doing what you're doing because it's making a difference.
In college, he started a nonprofit called KFM Making a Difference, which awards autistic students with college scholarships. He later earned his doctorate in education. He's now a professional speaker on autism and inclusion.
We've gotten inquiries from people from Africa, Canada, the UK, and it's just shown me that we're not alone in this community. There are people impacted by autism across the globe.
He's written 4 books. His latest one is called Autistics on Autism. All proceeds will go to his scholarship foundation.
You are going to find 100 amazing autistic adults' stories of how they were able to navigate their adolescence and ultimately succeed in their journeys.
He says most publicly funded services end for autistic children when they age out of school, so that could be late teens. He's fighting to get resources for autistic adults through legislation and has this message for parents.
Never give up on your child. Never give up on getting them the best quality supports so they could live their best quality of lives, because again, it's a spectrum. And it's really about providing those resources across the lifespan, because autistic children will grow up to be autistic adults, and we need to be ready for them.
And he'll keep promoting awareness any way he can.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for what I hope will be an enlightening conversation around a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, navigating relationships and dating for those with disabilities. I wanted to share a quick video with all of you to give you a little background on who I am for those who are back from our last presentation a month ago. Welcome back, and we're really excited to navigate this topic with all of you because often in my work as not only one of the only openly autistic professionally certified public speakers in the United States, about 85 to 90% of my peer mentoring work that I do with individuals with disabilities the majority of the time they never want to talk about mock interviews. They don't want to talk about college applications. They want to talk about the cute boy and the cute girl and how they go about navigating their first-time relationships. And sometimes that can be very, very challenging because there are limited resources available currently in our community that are focused on disability and dating. So I've had the wonderful opportunity to travel the globe in the past 12 years now as a professional speaker. Most of the work I do is focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. I speak with companies on hiring, helping individuals with disabilities finding full-time employment. But one of my labors of love is getting the opportunity to speak in K through 12, but also getting the opportunity to speak with SEPAGs and PTA groups on the idea of helping individuals transitioning to adulthood with disabilities. And dating often falls through the cracks. So I applaud Monroe Township High School for championing this topic specifically because it's something that I wish more schools would have the opportunity to do. So similar to our presentation last year, or actually last month, sorry, need more coffee in me. We will give the opportunity for all of you to receive the PowerPoint slide notes after tonight's presentation. There will be a little QR code at the end of today's presentation. We'll also have about 15 minutes at the end for any questions that you specifically have as well. So just to give you a little background for those who are new, who haven't had the opportunity to meet us yet. So in addition to our full-time work public speaking, mostly on diversity, equity, inclusion with a specific focus on disability, we also get the opportunity to have a 501c3 nonprofit organization where we provide scholarships for autistic students to pursue a post-secondary education, in addition to providing peer mentoring for those with disabilities from the ages of 16 to 24, primarily focus on that transition. So when we talk about this topic of disability, we also have had the opportunity to work on the first season of a show on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum, US, which won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards and has been renewed for a second season, where we help our entertainment industry understand the main topics that we need to talk about when we talk about disability and relationships. Things such as intimacy, which we'll talk in great detail about tonight. Open communication. How we can look also at rejection and some best practices when you are looking on navigating dating on relationships. But one of the big things is we as a society really need to push towards navigating awareness to acceptance and stop looking at stereotypes. One of the things I hope I can leave you with today is the idea of breaking down stereotypes specifically that have been impacting the disability community when it comes to relationships and dating. So honestly, the beginning of helping anyone find love, regardless if they have a disability, is the individual loving themselves first. So we'll talk about ways that individuals with disabilities can build on their own self-awareness of who they are as individuals to put the best versions of themselves out there for a potential partner tonight. And we'll also talk a little bit about self-esteem and confidence, in addition to hygiene, and then also realistic expectations. Often in our community, we see a lot of entertainment-related projects that give us a look at what disability and love could look like, but it's about really bringing in realistic expectations for those in our community. So on our Facebook page, Kerry's Autism Journey, we share many, many different quotes in addition to inspirational memes in the hopes of defeating stigmas within our community. And this is one of the key ones. And it simply says this: yes, disabled people date and also have sex. It's like we're human beings or something. We often in the community still see a lot of stigmas where people even come up to me this day as somebody who's an autistic adult and say to me, do disabled people actually have sex and intimacy within our community? We have to defeat these stigmas. Individuals with disabilities most of the time want the same things that we want. In addition to that, in a world where authenticity is often undervalued, autistic individuals often bring an unmatched level of genuineness and deserve every opportunity to find meaningful relationships. Some of the autistic people I know are some of the most empathetic people I know in this world. So when we talk about this, it's just about giving them the opportunity to succeed, not only in the workforce, but also encouraging people to give people with autism a chance. And growing up with autism, masking was also something I do subconsciously, where as part of social rules, I would also thought I had to look someone in the eye or I was being rude. So for everyone here today listening to this, you should never force somebody into eye contact. Instead, meet them where they are and find a way to communicate for them. This will be super important in the realm of dating and relationships as well, because a lot of the times we need to encourage our kids to be open communicators when it comes to actually having conversations about the fact that sometimes they might have challenges with eye contact. Sometimes they may have challenges being able to focus on their partner's key interests for long periods of time. So being open and honest can help with those connections. And in addition to that, one topic we'll talk a little bit about tonight is puberty and the idea of things like hygiene and growing pains and those first feelings for somebody else. And as part of our video series called Special Community, we met this incredible couple named Will and Amanda, who are both have a disability, and this is what they want the world to know about their love story.
When I first met Will, I figured he could be just like a great friend. And then when we sat down, we just couldn't stop talking. And it's just like, we clicked right away. And we started talking about the same interests, what we like. And then, you know, it almost feels like love at first sight.
Oh, well, if you want to put it that way, but things do take time, actually.
That's true. We sure had a lot of memorable moments, don't we, Will?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Lots of sweet ones, and very exciting.
Any particular favorites that you remember?
Well, from what I can remember from our special dates, I remember when we went on a Valentine's date to Olive Garden.
Oh.
And then afterwards, we came back to my place and watched Lady and the
Tramp. Parents and those who are looking after kids on the spectrum, actually, to not give up on them, actually, because you never know what they might be able to show, actually. You just need to be willing, because the key word, I think, is listen, actually, and just pay attention, actually, though, and stuff. Either whether that's to their interests or try to get into their, as was pointed out in the lecture today, about trying to come into their world, if you will, or something, actually, to find that way in, and then go in with them and stuff, actually. And then they might take you to places where, you know, you never thought possible.
So what are some hopes that you have for each other in the future?
I know we've had the conversation before a little bit of a while back, but I wouldn't really mind getting married someday, and hoping possibly someday maybe start a family. And if not, there's plenty of options. There could be adoption. There could also be different kinds of like ways of, and if we don't have the time of having children, there's always different animals, and like pet-wise, cat.
Oh, yes, because I know you have a bunch of cats at home and
Yes.
stuff, actually.
I have 4 cats at home.
So the importance of, we'll skip Jane Wants a Boyfriend just for the time being, but what I want you to know is when we are helping our loved ones navigate relationships, it's not only about sharing those key expert resources out there in our community. It's not only about role playing. It's not only about talking about things like small talk and how to go about having those conversations with a partner. It's also giving them positive peer role models to look up to who have successfully navigated this, because that in itself is a great focus to help individuals have the confidence in themselves to go about navigating relationships. So we've actually met over 150 self-advocates, all from a young individual with Down syndrome all the way to an older gentleman with cerebral palsy. And many of them have discussed the idea of wanting to be in a relationship someday. And some of them have had success like Will and Amanda. We need to continue to highlight positive stories so when kids do want to go about potentially going into relationships, they know that it's possible. Will and Amanda, who had been dating 4 years since that video came out, are now married, and they are also part of our New Jersey community. They are part of the Autism Society Southwest affiliate chapter of New Jersey. So they're doing some incredible things today. And the importance of understanding that children with disabilities will become adults with disabilities. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but as part of the transition IEP process, which in many states happens at 14, in some states at 16, you can actually, as part of your transition IEP, focus on social skill training, on finding meaningful friendships and relationships. This is a great way of talking about things like small talk, being able to focus on things like active listening, which hopefully later down the line can lead to a potential partner. But we have to normalize that children with disabilities will become adults with disabilities, and we need to be ready for them because some of them will want to go about meaningful relationships. And we also have to remind our society that it's not only about relationships, but those with disabilities today in our community have found success as parents as well. And getting the opportunity to highlight their stories really goes to show how we can normalize this topic. So we met this incredible young man named Sam who has a very special story of trying to find a connection in the disability world.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 28 years old, diagnosed with Asperger's at age 14 for that nonverbal learning disability and ADHD. I got married last year and I'm expecting my first child this year. The key to find that confidence is just be yourself. It's not something you see in the movies. It's not what your parents tell you. It's just go out there and allow yourself to make mistakes. And the fact that you even tried, that's a victory in itself. It doesn't have to go well. It can go horribly wrong. But did you learn something? That's something positive. Or how much I was bullied or other struggles of life, family always was there for me to have that kind of support now of my own. It makes me feel happy, and just the fact that I feel like everyone else, and all the things that I thought I never could do, I've already done. And now I got to tackle this whole new thing called fatherhood. And the fact that I'm now using my own life story as inspiration to others fills me with a lot of confidence and a lot of self-worth.
So I absolutely love his story, and his story actually went viral when we posted it on our Facebook page, received over 189,000 views within the first 4 days it was posted on our Facebook page, Kerry's Autism Journey. His kid is adorable, and it's truly amazing to see because we talk in 2023 about this topic of children transitioning to adulthood, but there's so many adults today who are thriving in dating and potential relationships. So one of the big things that has been a barrier to entry for those with disabilities trying to find love and connections is misinterpreting signs of friendliness. Unfortunately, today we also live in a very focused emphasis on online dating. And in many of our societies, hookup culture is still something that dominates many of our mainstream media topics. And unfortunately today, this can also lead to people with disabilities misunderstanding different levels of intimacy towards that somebody touching somebody on the shoulder or on the arm as not necessarily being a friend, but them thinking that it's a potential relationship partner. So we need to role play different situations with our kids on signs of friendliness. Just because somebody smiles or talks to you may not mean that they are romantically interested. Also important to understand signals of disinterest, such as nonverbal body language, which can be very, very challenging for those with disabilities, such as flirtation or, for example, any type of physical touch as well. When it comes to actually navigating these relationships as well, it's important to do your research. It's also important to look at online dating, which we'll talk about a few avenues that your potential teens can look into when it comes to that situation. In addition to that, when it comes to what we do in our dating coaching, is really focus on those actual first dates. That is typically the biggest barrier to entry when it comes to individuals just getting the opportunity to meet somebody. So the ideas of having a structured routine that's focused on showing up on time, don't assume anything before that actual date. Go in wanting to learn about the individual, and don't go in with any perceived notions about the individual. We often see that some of the kids that we work with in a mentor role, they will Google their potential partner right before. We've all done it. We've all done it when we were growing up. And it's important to know that that is just one side of who they might potentially be as a person. So listening and having open communication is really significant. Keeping lines of communication open as well. Listening and asking questions, not settling, and a great resource for those who want to potentially date with a disability is via Easter Seals. They have a great webinar program where they provide free webinars, video webinars, focused on a wide range of topics for individuals transitioning with a disability to adulthood. Easter Seals is one of the biggest grassroots nonprofits that are focused on disability today in our society. In addition to that, when we talk about that structured routine, hygiene becomes a key area of interest that we need to have larger conversations about. The Vanderbilt Kennedy Center actually started a visual schedule that focuses on encouraging good hygiene, focused on things like showering, things like brushing your teeth. Many individuals I know, especially younger children, have visual schedules in their bathrooms to help them with prompts such as brushing their teeth, remembering to wash their hands after they've used the bathroom, in addition to the importance of good hygiene as well. So this is just available on the Vanderbilt website. Vanderbilt has also been a tremendous resource because they just started an online portal to help those with autism actually go about navigating employment. They're one of the biggest employment portals currently available in our society today for those with autism to consider. When we also talk about hygiene, I always definitely recommend thinking about it as a game, if you will. There are some great tools like timers, which is a visual timer, which can give individuals the opportunity to see how fast they might be able to go about every single thing. And by turning it into a game, it can lead to potential reward systems in your households where a certain individual who just spends 10 minutes being able to do this, this, and this, and then gain a reward as a way of being able to do that really quickly, also just helps them through the process of being able to go through that transition. Also looking at trying to understand and meet a child where they are when it comes to the specific hygiene products that they prefer. Because so many individuals, not only in the autism world, but those with sensory processing disorders, have challenges, and we might not know this, especially if they're minimally verbal or have challenges on things like using specific deodorants, shampoos, soaps, because of the smell and having a hyper-stimulated smell towards these different things. Also, a big recommendation I have for especially young men is shaving. Being able to really get a great electric razor versus somebody who might try to use a straight blade, which might have more sensory stimulation, can be really, really beneficial. And let them see things like, for example, visual modeling is really, really important. Going on YouTube and just looking on just quick tutorials on how to shave and being able to see a visual before they're actually going into that situation can be really beneficial as well. In addition to that, also try to get your community. One of the things that we mentioned in our previous presentation is that it takes a village. And when it comes to that, discussing with a child's OT, things like self-care goals can be really beneficial. And many OTs in school have been trained in terms of self-care goals as a child is transitioning to adulthood. Things such as creating visual supports to help them with bathing, dressing, and grooming, helping with sensitivities. And one of my biggest recommendations is also creating a calendar. Being able to go on things like Google Calendar and being able to get push notifications that trigger a child to be able to stay up to date with their hygiene. Things such as every 4 weeks getting a haircut, every 2 weeks cutting my nails. And if they like technology, they could also consider looking at Facebook groups and looking at different ways that they could get their hair cut. It's like there are so many different Facebook groups for different fashion products today, how to cut your hair that could be beneficial towards giving an individual those visuals to help them understand that it can be really, really cool to go about this process. I grew up having the Aerosmith rock star hair because I could never do haircuts growing up because of my sensory challenges. But when I went onto, I'm dating myself, MySpace back in the day, and I would look at different rock star haircuts and noticing how cool they looked, it really made me feel like, oh my God, that would be so cool to have that trim. And it would push me in towards getting those haircuts to come to a place where I could be, not Steven Tyler, but I could have a little bit of a shorter rock star haircut. In addition to that, when we talk about relationships for those with disabilities, we can't forget girls. Often girls fall through the cracks, and unfortunately many girls with disabilities are more likely to be sexually abused, especially from those teenage and young adult years, from the ages of 16 to 24 being the most prevalent. And we need to have larger conversations with girls because there's limited resources available online about things like menstruation. Being able to discuss things such as how the body develops. That's also why it's important to have really thorough health classes to discuss topics like this. Discussing things like breast development. Discussing things like periods could come around 12 to 18 months once breast development actually starts. Consider also including a visual schedule or social narrative to help an individual who might have developmental challenges when it comes to this issue. Making them aware that they're not specifically sick when that is coming about, but any stomach-related pains are perfectly normal when those periods actually start happening. And then also definitely look at ironically enough, there are so many different sensory toys available for our disability community to take advantage of, but there are also sensory-related products that are focused on menstruation. Ironically enough, there are some on Amazon that are focused on menstrual pads that are quote-unquote sensory-friendly for our disability community to take advantage of when that comes about. In addition to that, keeping it positive when somebody is going through this period, especially our young teens, thinking about ways of building our reward systems, whether it's their favorite meal, and if you're wanting to learn a little bit more, again, you guys will get all the resources because I know you're a little back there, but there's a free social story to explain menstruation to young girls who have disabilities at abletolearn.com. And it's a great, great resource. It's just a one-sheet PDF that really breaks it down in greater detail. Also, when we talk about this, it's also important that we continue to include the LGBTQ community as part of these larger conversations. When we talk about disability making up the largest minority, we also have to remember that many of us in the minority communities have a lot in common, especially when it comes to stigmas and prejudices that are impacting us today in our society. And one of the things that I continue to talk about is there is still that stigma, again, about people who are disabled not having sex. And when awareness turns into acceptance, it's not only being aware about what disabilities are, but treating people with disabilities with integrity and respect and giving them the same chances that you would anyone else and looking at them as a person before their disability. Special education classes need to also offer sex ed. It's walking a tightrope, if you will, because many focused special education programs don't necessarily do the same curriculum when it comes to sexual education. And then in addition to that, some individuals on the other end of the spectrum may not want to be in a relationship. One of my favorite examples is Dr. Temple Grandin. She has said countless times as an individual with a disability that the love of her life is her work. And that is going to be the situation for some with disabilities. But it's giving those individuals with the disabilities to understand what is available for them when it comes to relationships and also intimacy in the future. In addition, one area for entry for individuals with disabilities is disclosing their diagnosis, especially when it comes to those first few dates. My rule of thumb is I recommend bringing it up after the first few dates, especially if some individuals have more characteristics of their disabilities on the surface versus others. Last month, many of you heard that I like to say that I have an invisible disability, because people come up to me and they say, Kerry, you have autism, but you don't look like you have autism. So a lot of people really need to understand that, especially when it comes to dates, especially if you have a few quirks, it might be best to go about revealing that, because many of the partners that I even looked up to when I was just starting dating when I was 18, I went about telling them about my diagnosis right away. And they actually thought that I was very brave to actually share that. And it actually led to us having stronger ties in our relationships by being willing to discuss a little bit about that. Discuss what challenges your diagnosis may bring can also be beneficial, but then also your strengths. You should never go into it in a deficit model approach, especially when it comes to dating. Making sure that your teens and young adults understand. Simple quote, I just wanted you to know that sometimes because of having a disability, I have challenging times sitting down for long periods of time and may have challenges with eye contact. It doesn't have to be any specific thing. You don't have to bring up the diagnostic statistical manual and bring up a big definition of what every disability is. It could just be simply very, very short, sweet, and honest. In addition to that, we also need to encourage for our teens and young adults to understand those levels of intimacy. Being able to understand the differences between things like hand-holding, kissing, and then also emotional intimacy as well, and being able to help them understand things like giving compliments, being able to do that as a way of being well-rounded as an individual. It just doesn't make sense for those with disabilities, but it just makes sense for everybody to have an understanding of emotional literacy and what that looks like. Literacy? Intimacy, there we go. Role-playing a conversation with somebody in your circle as well can be a really great step towards having those conversations. Best policy is directly asking both in physical and emotional intimacy. This is also because we live in a society today where this has come up many times within our community, not only specifically in the Me Too movement, but we are seeing that it's really, really imperative that we have those conversations because a lot has fallen through the cracks, especially in the past few decades. So when you're unsure about something, make sure that your teen or young adult is asking questions when it comes to that emotional or physical intimacy. And then also think about any sensory challenges you may face with levels of intimacy and try to rank them on a number scale as a way of helping that specific partner understand your different levels of sensitivity. There are still individuals with disabilities I know today who have been married who don't sleep in the same bed. And that is perfectly okay because some individuals have those sensory related challenges. But being open and honest about that, to making sure that the person knows that they don't necessarily have anything against that individual, but it's because of those specific sensory challenges that might be associated with their disability. Also consider online dating. It's a great platform for many individuals with disabilities who might have challenges with things like small talk. I often, one of my favorite dating apps for those on the autism spectrum is called Hickey. It's a free online app that focuses on dating and friendships for those with autism, but it's also great for those with disabilities, as many individuals on there have some form of co-occurring condition in addition to their autism diagnosis. In addition, I've also seen many males having specific challenges because it feels like a lot of the times it's a lot of individuals who are guys who are swiping as much as humanly possible on avenues like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge. So sometimes boys having more challenges than females on average because girls are more likely, because of social norms, to wait for a man to actually go about that dating situation. In addition to that, catfishing as well has become a huge issue that you have to be mindful for those with disabilities to consider. When it comes to disability-specific dating services, I definitely recommend Whispers for You. This is a great program because it also helps with a compatibility score if anyone has ever been on the website eHarmony. It takes about 20 minutes where you go through an online forum where you discuss your topics and interests. That is a similar principle to Whispers for You, where you actually get to understand an individual on a 1 to 100 point scale and try to be compatible with somebody else who has a disability. In addition to that, there's a forum that has over 80,000 people with disabilities on it called wrongplanet.net, which could be an avenue for you to consider as well. When we talk about the importance of navigating disability, navigating a relationship with a disability, it's also important to understand that rejection happens to everyone. In one of the books that I came out with, it was in, God, it was a while ago. It was 2014. I came out with a book called Autism and Falling in Love, where I break down the idea of the 5 stages of grief. Basically, the concept of this book was to somebody who got away, to a partner who I had lost, and being able to build on self-awareness of what I learned from losing somebody that I loved. And one of the things that I discuss in this book as a self-help book for those with disabilities is the idea of understanding rejection, looking at the 5 stages of grief, and also understanding that there are future possibilities as well. That is something we need to continue to promote, and that's also why peer role models who have had success in dating can be really helpful towards those individuals during those challenging times. Also, be sure to look out for disabled women. We continue to see, especially during months like Mental Health Awareness Month, there is a larger association with individual girls with disabilities dealing with challenges with sexual abuse. And being able to have open and honest conversations, especially with girls who might not even know that they're being sexually abused within their community who have a disability. So being able to build on what the definition of sexual abuse is, understanding that it may not be a level of intimacy, but it actually might be a crime is really important. So additional resources that I would recommend to do further learning about navigating for those with disabilities. Asperger's Syndrome and Sexuality. It was a book written by 2 prominent known names in the autism community, Isabella Hanel and also Tony Atwood, a famously known autistic author. In addition to that, I would also definitely recommend checking out Adam, the movie. In addition, Adam is a movie that stars Hugh Grant and Rose Byrne, where Hugh Grant is a young individual with Asperger's who loses his father and moves and learns about a neighbor who he gets into a romantic relationship with, himself having Asperger's syndrome. Also, I would recommend Amy Griffino if you want to learn more about disability and sexuality. She's focused primarily on sexuality for those with disabilities. In addition to Lindsay Nebecker, there's a great documentary that used to be on Netflix, but it's available on Amazon to check out, called Autism and Love, that focuses on 4 relationships of individuals with autism navigating dating on the spectrum. So finally, before we open it up to Q&A, I just wanted to share 10 final things I wish people knew about dating somebody with a disability, just to give you a really good snapshot of tonight's presentation. So number 10 is simply accessibility makes a world of difference. When we think about this, it's really, really key that we have those open and honest conversations with a potential partner about what we do not find accessible, especially when it comes to specific dates. For example, many of the kids I work with have really challenging times in public places. So an intimate coffee shop versus a movie in a public mall might be a little intimidating for some of the individuals that I work with. So having those open and honest conversations about accessibility can help build and evolve that relationship. Eye contact, again, will be difficult for many of us at times. So understand that some individuals with disabilities actually learn better when they're not looking somebody in the eyes from an auditory processing perspective. Asking me any question you have, again, being open and honest about who you are and what you want in a relationship just makes sense for everybody. If something goes over our head, try to make us understand what you meant by that situation. We can also date people who aren't disabled too. I've had 7 girlfriends in my life. None of them have had a disability. I've always been open to having somebody who had a disability, but that has never came up for me. So it's important to note that, for example, when we talk about shows like Love on the Spectrum, while it's great that individuals with autism are connected with one another, there are going to be some individuals who might not necessarily have those same connections with those individuals. If you're shocked that I'm disabled, don't be. If you go online before our date and find out that I have autism, don't jump to conclusions. Help us understand what you're comfortable with when it comes to being intimate. Give us time to process small or big time decisions. This is really, really key, especially for those who have transition challenges, especially those young adults, because it's also important to understand what the definition of those small and big time decisions are. I see so many kids I work with who are just about to move in with a potential partner for the first time and not being able to go through that transition because there's so many things about it. It's about getting a mortgage. It's about looking at the proper area if they want to potentially have children one day. So it all comes down to being able to define what those small and big time decisions are. And then finally, I take this from one of my favorite artists today, Lin-Manuel Miranda, but it's simply love is love, no matter the person. We need to continue to have conversations that some of the people that we're going to meet in our lives are going to be potential partners for us, and they may have a disability, and that is okay. Let's look at the individual before their disability, understand that they may have quirks, they may have challenges, but they also may have amazing strengths. So I never expected, like when I was 18, I never expected to, I didn't know how to talk to women. I'm 35 now. I still don't know necessarily if I know how to talk to women. But I continue to say that I've had success today, and I can only hope for future success for many of the kids in our disability community. I like to say autism can't define me, and I define autism, and I can only hope, regardless of any journey that you have specifically on this topic, that you can help your loved ones define their lives and their journeys and the way that they best see it every single day. Thank you all so much again for having me here tonight. And these are the ways that you can get all the PowerPoint slide notes from tonight's presentation by scanning this QR code with your camera phone, or going to the link bit.ly/freeautismresources, all lowercase. And I would love to answer any questions that any of you have at this time. Thanks again for having me out. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You said about including the IEPs and the social goals. If you could give like the top 2 goals, and obviously IEPs are individualized, but if you could give the top 2 goals for that 14 to 16-year-old to work on, what do you think would be social?
Yeah, I think the idea is that twice a week, an individual tries to go up to somebody that they don't know. It's about making sure that it's measurable. So some of those goals will look like simply just trying to meet somebody else, and then some of it will just be in somebody's specific social circle, just branching out and starting those specific conversations. It just makes sense for everybody, but that's one of the big things. And then the other thing I truly see in terms of social goals is being able to have more unified programming, which can be established via the IEP when we're talking about peer mentors. You actually, as part of an IEP, can actually have a peer mentor for your child. Sometimes the child study team might not specifically call it a peer mentor, but it might be a lunch buddy. It might be somebody who can become part of that child's village to help them build on those social skills. So those would probably be the 2 biggest things I would say from a social perspective.
And my other question was also spoke about sex education.
Yeah.
So when you have students that are moderately or severely impacted by their disability, at what age do you introduce that? When it's physically happening or when it's cognitively, when they're aware of what's happening? What is your recommendation on that?
It's always the same. It's regardless where they are developmentally, having those conversations at those specific ages, typically branching out as soon as high school, but sometimes earlier, because girls develop faster than guys. It can happen as early as 10. Many of the high schools that I see really just start those sex ed when a student is in 9th grade, when they're a high school freshman. Again, there is no rule to thumb because it looks different from every school district, especially if you're homeschooling or you're in a private school district. So it will look different, but I typically say that 10 to 14 age range is when everybody, regardless where they are developmentally, because you never want to hide it, because some individuals that we say are more developmentally challenged, many of them that I know are always listening, even though they can't express what they're necessarily hearing at specific times. So always pursuing competence and using that same curriculum when it comes to sex ed that you might not necessarily do from a day-to-day basis when it comes to Common Core. Anytime. Lots of questions. Yes.
Hi, it's a pleasure meeting you. I was
Likewise.
really excited to be tonight and seeing you and listening to you.
Thank
so
you.
I'm a mom of a 12-year-old boy, is autistic, and I moved from Italy here 3 years ago, just because I believe that America can give my son a different opportunity, better opportunities than Italy. We're very behind with the spectrum. But what I was going to ask you is, forgive, first of all, my English is still very poor, but I hope I can give you the idea what I'm going to ask. You talked about hygiene, and you talked about your personal experience. You said, I think in the video, they were saying that you didn't speak until a certain age.
Right.
Can I ask you if I'm not too I'm not
I'm an open book.
intruding.
You can ask me
Okay.
anything. Especially on a topic like navigating disability, you can ask me anything,
All right.
really.
Thank you. I would like to know what was your emotion when you finally could break that wall and speak?
Right. So I started saying my first few words when I was about 3, and then complete sentences when I was about 7. Some of my first words were juice, mom, and it was just from a standpoint of when I was diagnosed with PDD and OS, a form of autism, when I was 4. 2 years later, I was re-diagnosed at Cornell Medical Hospital in New York because of emotional disorder because of my challenges with limited speech. Now, it was a breakthrough to me when I started speaking in complete sentences because, like the NBC Today Show video mentioned, once I started talking, you couldn't give me a shut up, you couldn't give me to stop talking, ever. Great career for public speaking. But honestly, I think the biggest wall was broken when I learned about my diagnosis when I was 11 and a half. Because I always knew I was special, but I didn't know what that meant. And years of struggling with my communication, being able to finally put a name on what my challenges were, when I always knew I was the quietest kid in my class. I always knew I was the shyest kid in my class, but I didn't know why necessarily that was happening. And being able to understand my autism diagnosis and having a conversation with my parents about it when I was 11 and a half helped me break down all the walls, not only the communication walls, but every single wall of why I was special, why I was having these challenges, and what that meant towards not only for me right now, but years later, sitting in on my IP meetings to learn about what my future might have in store because of my diagnosis.
Thank you for your answer. And another question about hygiene, like I mentioned earlier.
Sure.
Personally, with my son, I'm having a hard time with bathing. Okay.
Sure.
So I got all the visual cues. You know, I just made a table with several sequence. You know, just to tell now first scrub, then rinse. You know, all that we all know. And it's helping him, but I believe that you got a good point tonight. I was listening about the shampoo that might be sometimes have sensory.
Right.
Yes, yes. So I think that's what it is for my son. son. He doesn't like actually that side of the,
Right.
yes. So it might be that. What do you suggest? What should I do?
Right. I mean, you can literally Google many of these things that will discuss what the different layers of shampoos will actually be. For example, I like Suave because Suave doesn't necessarily have too many bubbles compared to other products. But again, it is no one size fits all when it comes to this. It's just about doing your research. But there are from a perspective of now knowing girls, I know many who use herbal essences, especially current and former girlfriends, and that could lead to a lot of such. So it's really just about doing your research more than anything else and understanding, because a lot of the time it will give you a little bit of a better understanding. It's like there's eye sensitivity for some people, so some people will not use certain shampoos because it will affect their eyes. And it all goes back to those sensitivities. If you just type in to a Google search, shampoo sensitivities, you'll learn a lot more about what shampoos might work best for your child. And also soaps as well, soap sensitivity. It all goes back to those who might get rashes and break out during certain soaps. It all comes back to those certain things and going into greater detail of those, in addition to ingredients that are in all of the products as well.
Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Back.
Yeah, it is.
I'd like to give her a round of applause.
Yes.
Great job.
Thank you, sir. I just took her to Dubai recently, and I literally called her out like 15 minutes within the presentation, and she was so mad at me. But she's a social butterfly. She loves to talk to people. But after that, I was like, all right, Mom, I'm sorry. I apologize. They gave her an award right afterwards, too. And we were both bawling. We were like trying to hold it together. But yeah, I love her to death. I wouldn't be here without you today. Yeah.
So since you said you're an open book, I'll ask, how are you with haircuts now, and what was it or is it that you so sensitive? Because that's something we struggle with.
Well, the thing with the clippers especially can be very consuming, especially for those who hear the buzz, especially when it goes to their ears, because like I can never get a fade on the sides of my hair because of those sensations. So, and my mom could probably share a little bit about this too if you want, now that they know who you are. Clippers, I mean, anything with those noises, it was really about getting a great rapport with somebody and being able to, I mean, Mom, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
All I know is he gets his haircut too much. I like
Yeah.
He's got this thing with Ken, he gets his haircut all the time.
All the time. But things that helped me growing up, what would you say?
No, it was just a bowl cut,
Yeah.
You put the bowl on and cut the hair.
Like Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber.
Do you still feel those same sensitivities? You're just able to better cope with them, or do you think you've grown sort of into them now?
I had a great sensory integration dysfunction therapist who would come in on weekends who would provide me with different ideas, such as looking at different sensations, using sensory brushes, using sensory functioning toys to help me GAC, Play-Doh, which would help me with my transitions when I was having those certain specific feelings when I was going there. It's like, there's a great program called Clip-Its, which actually is a disabled, oh, you know? Okay, great. Which actually focused on disability-friendly haircuts as well. So, and they have a ton of them now today in our community. So yeah, I would definitely recommend looking at disability-friendly haircuts because there are a lot of barbers who now train themselves focus specifically on the sensory challenges. I mean, there are people who have buzzers today that don't make any sounds, which is incredible how technology has advanced so much to help with those sensory considerations for our community. Anytime. Your thoughts, questions? All right. Well, I'll be around afterwards. I brought a few copies of my books if you would like to check them out. We have all of our books. We wrote 4 books, self-advocacy, relationships, a children's book about 2 individuals on the autism spectrum, navigating self-advocacy, and then our latest book, Autistics on Autism, where 100 stories of young autistic adults pursuing a post-secondary education. Some of them mention romance, so it might be valuable as well. And thank you all again for having us out, and drive safe.